So let's talk about some of the methods that we can use. Market factor analysis. Why? I'm glad that we defined that term. Market factor analysis is using a market factor to determine demand. This works best in industrial markets where you have derived demand. Remember when we talked about derived demand, where for component products it's just a small part of the large product. So again, if I am in the tire industry, I know that each car is going to have 4 tires. So if I know what the car sales are, I know how many I'm going to sell this year, and I also know that a tire has a life of 4 years. So I know that if I've got the forecast for this year's car sales plus if 25% of the cars are still on the road in 4 years, then I've got replacement tires for cars that were sold 4 years ago, replacement tires for cars that were sold 8 years ago, but I can do a pretty good job of estimating demand for tires if I can get a good forecast for cars. Another way of forecasting is talking to people who know what they're doing, surveying knowledgeable people. And again, people who are working in an industry tend to know what's going on. One method is buyer intention survey. And this is where you talk to your customers and ask them what they anticipate their purchases are going to be in the coming year. That's a good way of forecasting. Some of the downsides of that would be they may be telling you how much they're going to buy, but they're not telling you that it's not going to be from you. And the other is sometimes in negotiations, people will use a large number as a negotiating ploy. So, how many you think you're going to buy in the next year? Well, give me a price for 1 million units. That's great. Well, let's start with 10,000. Okay. The other side of that coin is Salesforce survey. Again, salespeople are working with customers all the time. They probably have a pretty good idea of what's going on with the customers. So ask them what's going on. Again, works better in business-to-business markets where you have ongoing relationships rather than fashion where you've got one-time sales. The good news is you have control over your salespeople because they work for you, so you can get good compliance with a Salesforce survey. Anybody here work in sales? Nobody? Nobody works in sales? You work in sales? Do you have a quota? Kinda? So if your boss asked you how much you're going to sell in the next year, what would you tell him? Say again? Would you give him a high number or a low number? A low number. Why? Because you want to look good, right? So one of the issues with Salesforce survey is you've got two competing mechanisms. One, especially if salespeople are on quota, which means that they have a required amount they want to sell. And we talked about performance-based compensation. Many times once you get over quota, bonuses kick in. That's the good stuff. There's a tendency to want to lowball the estimate so that you can look good. And then the other side of that coin is salespeople are naturally optimistic because there's so much rejection in that field that you just need it to survive. So it's kind of like you guys at the beginning of the semester, I've done D's all my life, but this semester is going to be different. This semester I'm really going to study, and this semester I'm going to get right on top of my homework, and it's not going to be like it has been every semester since then, right? Salespeople are like that too. I'm going to do great this semester. So you just need to deal with those realities. Another source of information is senior management. And believe it or not, many times people in senior managed positions got there because they know what they're doing. Not always, but a lot of times they have a pretty good feel for what's going on with the industry. The downside for senior management input is we've got the natural ego biases involved where I tend to focus on what impacts me directly and can be less objective about the marketplace. And this approach works better in early stages of planning when you don't have a good track record, there's not a good market factor. Where do you start with? There's a couple methods. The Delphi method is just fun to talk about. And this is where you would survey senior management as to what you think sales are going to be for the next year. And then you tabulate the results and you say, this is what people said. The high was $1 million, the low was 100,000, and then you do another round. And you just kind of keep doing that, and you'll end up kind of finding a consensus. Another approach that I don't have written down here, I just love the name. It's called the lost horse method. And we'll talk about the chain ratio method later, and lost horse is not dissimilar from that. But with a lost horse method, you start out with a known fact, and then you adjust it based on things that you know about the marketplace. So we have the capacity of selling 100,000 units, but we know that we're having trouble in the Midwest, so I'd knock it down 5,000 units because of that. And I know that they just passed a law in California where the minimum wage went up so that demand from California could be higher. Based on that, I'll increase it a little bit. And the idea is that you start out with your preliminary estimate and then you adjust it based on things that you know that are going on in the marketplace.